Hi everybody, I am going to try this on YouTube because I cannot get this in 3 minutes. So this week's Mid Cafe is coming to us from Hallett, who is interested in learning more about the publishing journey, how you get an agent, what are kind of some speed bumps along the way, tips and tricks, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I think about this. These are solely my opinions and experiences. Everybody's experience is different, so keep that in mind. The biggest thing that I think a lot of us forget or never learn in our publishing journey is that the beginning of it is a really precious time when we're honing our craft, and we need to really respect that time because it's before we have deadlines, before we have editors, before we have reviewers and criticism and all those things that can make a writer's life a little bit more difficult. While you're honing your craft, you don't have all those obligations and other worries pressing on you. So it's a great time to do that, and you've given yourself a tremendous gift by being in this MFA, so I hope you make good use of it. So keep that in mind. Don't put the cart before the horse, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The next thing is when you do have your manuscript and you've done everything to it that you know how to do and you feel like you're ready to send it out, you have a couple of options. You can decide whether you want to be traditionally published or whether you want to self-publish. I don't know as much about self-publishing, to be honest, so I'm going to focus on traditional publishing for right now. But I do believe that more likely than not, the way that we're all going to survive in the coming, in the coming era of publishing is to be what I call, and what many of us call, a hybrid author. That is someone who publishes traditionally and who also publishes themselves through self-publishing platforms like Amazon. So keep that in mind. And the reason I say that is because whenever you get a contract from a traditional publisher, it's usually 2 years before that book comes out. So while you're waiting for that book to come out, it behooves you to have something else going on so that you have diverse income streams. So, if you have a self-published series that can come out faster, that excites your readership and keeps them wanting to read you. So consider that kind of thing, because that's all part of your business strategy as a writer, which you'll learn more about in subsequent classes. But basically, the way traditional publishing has gone is that you finish your manuscript, you're ready to send it out. If you want to be published by one of the big publishers, one of the big 5 like Simon & Schuster or Penguin or any of those people, it's now actually Penguin and Random House have actually merged. But anyway, if you want to be published by what we also call a New York publisher, then what you need to do is find an agent. And the way to find an agent, there are many, many ways to find an agent. But now that we have the internet, it's very easy to find what you need. I highly recommend going on Twitter, following writers that you like, and ultimately you will often see them mention or tag their agent. And that's one way to begin following agents and to see what they want, because you want to know what that agent is interested in. A lot of times agents will post something that they're interested in seeing that they haven't seen yet, and that's great because then you know whether or not they're really interested in the type of things you write. You don't want to send, say, a romance to an agent who doesn't represent romance. You don't want to send children's stuff to an agent who doesn't represent children's. A lot of people make these kind of mistakes, and they're easy to avoid if you're just paying attention. So pay attention, do your homework, research agents that are good for you. Then once you find the proper agent, then you query. And I'm not going to talk about the query process because I will be here all night. But it's like trying to get a job. I mean, it really is. You write a cover letter, you do, you send the sample, you find out what the submission guidelines are, you only do what they ask you to do, you don't do any more and you don't do any less. And I'm sure you'll learn about query letters in another class when you're talking about business stuff. But you do that, you send out your submission package, and you wait. So usually you'll get a response. It could be anywhere from that day, if the agent is really excited, to 6 weeks. It just depends. A lot of times people will pick their top 5 agents and submit to the top 5 and hope to get back a response and hope to get agents super interested enough to make an offer. When they make an offer, you can decide whether you want to accept based on what you're looking for in an agent. Everybody has different things that they want. Of course, all of us want them to sell our books because they have doors open to them in the publishing world that we don't, and that's why we need them. And then, we go from there. Once the agent has your submission and you guys have worked together on getting the book ready to be seen, then you send it out, or then the agent, sends it out to editors at publishing houses who might be interested. And then you wait some more, and then you see if anyone's going to take your manuscript. There's a whole lot of other stuff I'm leaving out, but that's the process. And then if they decide to buy your manuscript, then you have a contract. Then you usually get paid what's called an advance against royalties. And that can vary widely as far as how much money that is. Realize that the average author makes about $7,000 a year. So, that big, huge advance that you hear about is not common. I know lots of people who have gotten giant advances, especially in YA, but it's not common. So if you're writing, you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it for the love. And then you go from there. Once you sell the book, you need to be thinking about the next book. You need to be ready to pitch your next book. You need to be thinking about your author platform. One thing you should never do is sort of rest on your laurels. I've learned this the hard way. So what were surprises to me? I know this is getting kind of long. My publishing journey is this. I was attempting to submit an epic fantasy that I had worked on for a really long time. And I'd gotten lots of requests for fulls, but when I would send the full manuscript into agents, invariably they would send back rejections. So I didn't really know where to turn. I didn't know what I was going to do. I met an editor at a publishing house, and this is very weird and very rare, but I met an editor who agreed to take a look at the manuscript. So I sent him that manuscript, and he sat on it for 1.5 years, and this is why you want an agent, because an agent would never have allowed that to happen. And in the meantime, I had a friend who had been my critique partner in graduate school during my MFA. Her name was Shannon Hale, which is a name you might recognize. She had been approached. She had been doing pretty well in her career. She'd published her first book, which we'd worked on together, sort of critiquing each other throughout our program. She had sold it already and gotten awards and done really well for herself. So anyway, editors were approaching her, asking her if she wanted to help them with other projects. And one editor approached her looking for a writer for a dark fantasy project. And she said, I know just the person. So this editor contacted me and invited me to submit a proposal to their company for a book that was supposed to be dark fantasy, set in the Victorian era with fairies and a girls' boarding school, and it had all these cool little elements in it. And so I thought, why not? I'll just try this. So I went ahead and submitted a proposal, and the editor said to me, oh, this is awesome. Can you make this 10 books? And I went, sure, okay. So I made it 10 books. I created the entire story arc. I created a a series proposal. I did all that stuff, and I turned it in. And it was actually a contest. She was actually looking at a whole bunch of different people, so it wasn't just my submission. But anyway, she liked mine the best. They chose my book and my series, which was called Hallamere, to be the flagship for their young adult imprint. And this was Wizards of the Coast, the people who publish Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons and all this. They wanted to have young adult books, and so my series became the flagship for their new young adult side of things. And it was great. They did all kinds of great stuff. They promoted me. They sent me to book trade shows. They sent me to schools and libraries and conferences and all kinds of great stuff. And I didn't have an agent, so this was a work for hire contract. They owned all the rights. They kept everything. I owned nothing. And they paid me, which was nice. But the thing was, I didn't have any rights to the books. That all stayed with the publisher. Well, that's all well and good until something happens like what happened to my series, which was it got canceled right in the middle of the series because a new CEO came into the company and decided, okay, I don't want to publish YA books anymore. So let's stop it, and we're going to go back to publishing Magic, and we're going to go back to publishing Dungeons and Dragons, and that's all we're going to do. So my series was left hanging. They cut it off right in the middle. So I picked myself up, dusted myself off, and started all over again. So the day after my series was canceled, I started writing a new book. And I had gotten agents, and this is really weird. The way I got my first agents was that they just contacted me out of the blue and said, hey, we saw an ad for your books. You look awesome. We'd love to represent you. And I thought, oh, good. I don't have to do this query stuff anymore. So I went ahead and signed on with them, and it was great and everything, but then they didn't like any of my subsequent stuff. So they would never send anything out. And we went on for 2 years like that because they didn't want to send out my work. So I left. So with the new book, I did the traditional query. I wrote a query letter, and I got my agent, who was a children's agent, and she, after we did a whole bunch of revisions and stuff like that, she ended up selling my book, The Unnaturalists, and its sequel to Simon & Schuster. And that was wonderful. And that's kind of where I am right now. I've jumped off the children's and YA track a bit. I'm writing an adult epic fantasy right now. Actually, the book that got rejected all those years ago, I have totally rewritten it from scratch. And so I'm going to go out with that, hopefully sometime this fall or next spring. And who knows, if it doesn't sell, I'll just self-publish it. So that is my publishing journey. The big surprise to me has just been how like a roller coaster it is, but the luck involved, that's the biggest thing. Luck is a huge component, and also just the fact that you meet other writers and you kind of form a fellowship, and that has been a wonderful surprise. I have writers that I saw on the shelves when I was a teenager who are now my friends. People who I admired and looked up to, they're now my friends, and they're cheering me on, and they're really helping keep me going, and that is a thing that is beyond value. That acceptance is beyond price. So if you can develop those kind of relationships here and now in your MFA, you never know what's going to happen. Relationship means a lot in the writing world. And so that's part of why we encourage you to become active in all these different communities. So anyway, that's my very long publishing story. I hope you made it all the way through this video. If you didn't, I understand. But thanks for your question, Hallett, and I'm looking forward to more questions from the rest of you guys. Have a great week.